All right, we are live now. Hello, everyone. I'm Manjima Sharkar, and I welcome you all to this panel discussion on cultural identity and ideology, curated under TMYS review in association with Oxford University Press. Under this theme, TMYS Review December 2022 will explore the role of artistic endeavors of society in shaping cultural identity and ideology. I would also like to say that we are calling for submissions of stories, essays, and poems. And for project architecture and submission guidelines, please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz. Today's topic of discussion is evolution and adaptation of newspaper cartoons. We are honored to have with us Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari, Dr. Sagar Tarangamandal, Dr. Deborshee Gogoi, and Rianka Sarkar ma'am. We also invited Dr. Ahmad Abdel Tawwab, but he hasn't joined the panel yet. We sincerely hope that he joins this panel soon. I'm extremely glad to have you all as our esteemed speakers for today's discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. I shall now quickly introduce our speakers. Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari has over 12 years of teaching experience in journalism and mass communication. Prior to academics, she has worked in the area of corporate communications and PR. She has written more than 17 papers in reputed national and international journals, chapters in books. She has edited a book on COVID-19 impact and fake news. She conducted a training of trainers program for Maldives journalists sponsored by UNESCO. She is the member of International Association for Media and Communication Research, that is IAMCR, and Global Media Education Council, GMEC. Now let me introduce our second speaker. Dr. Sagar Tarangamandal works as an assistant professor in the Department of English, University of Kalyani. Over the years, both his teaching and research has remained committed to an exploration of conflicted geographies. His doctoral work was on Joe Sacco's comics journalism. He is a recipient of the Meenakshi Mukherjee Memorial Prize 2021, awarded by the Indian Association for Commonwealth Literature and Language Studies. He is also an avid philatelist. Now let me introduce our third speaker for today's panel. Dr. Gogoi is an assistant professor in the Department of Commerce at Gogoi College in Assam. The 37-year-old academician turned to cartoons as a way to illustrate the devastation humans have caused to his beloved wilderness. When he was at college and university, he started making cartoons about social issues. He found that humor was an effective medium to translate his thoughts and create awareness about nature. To him, cartoons and comic strips are a way to give a voice to voiceless animals. Dr. Gogoi has worked for organizations like Bombay Natural History Society, Nature Conservation Foundation, HEAL, Aronak, SBI, Oil, Sanctuary Asia, etc. Now, let me take the opportunity to introduce our final speaker for today's panel. Rianka Sarkar is an assistant professor of English at St. Claret College, Bangalore. She has authored her debut book, Reconstructing the Border History and Rethinking Space. She is pursuing her PhD in Northeastern Literature on the partition of Assam. She is a gold medalist from Guru Nanak Dev University, and her research interest includes partition history and narratives, folk tales, and cultural studies. She is also a creative writer and has published short stories, articles, and blogs in various online magazines and journals. Now, without further delay, we shall start with today's session. I request Dr. Maheshwari to please present her views on today's topic. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sarkar, and thank you so much for inviting me here among this, special panelist. I read about each one of you, and I'm really great to share this stage with you. I'll straight away come to the topic as newspaper cartoons is something which is very close to my heart also. Uh, as a kid, we have been grown up watching cartoons, and if all of us have some fascination for cartoons in all our childhood days. Newspaper cartoons, because I've been a media student for long, and as a scholar, I studied a lot of papers, research papers on cartoons. So a new angle was developed over a period of time about the importance of cartoons. So people have been taking them as a, maybe some of us maybe thinking it as an entertainment or a fun thing, but if you see, a cartoon is actually a unique form of journalism, wherein the cartoonist is actually, they are free to express their opinion. So when we talk about journalism, we normally talk about news in an unbiased form and there should not be any views on it. But cartoon is actually an editorial cartoon. That's why we call them editorial cartoon. So it is, I consider it as a form of journalism where you are actually giving your opinion. And newspaper cartoons are the expression of the journalist, if you see in that manner, which they are trying to express in with the help of some comments, some satire, and particularly on the current news, current story which is happening in the country or in the world. So by combining humor and news, you are actually giving a message. You are trying to give your opinion on it. So it is a very interesting way. The cartoonists, they have this interesting way of communicating with the help of humor, fun, satire, comment, and giving the right message, what they think, what is their opinion. So it is, of course, not news, but an opinion. And the modern day cartoons, that's why I said they fall under the category called editorial cartoons. And in the newspaper, they have a very special place. So we all remember those days when we started understanding the cartoon. We first thing we wanted to look as a teenager was the cartoon. And if you trust me, even today when I teach students, they are also inclined towards reading the cartoon. So these are certain things which grab the attention. It is something which is an integral part of newspapers, which time changes. We have digital media, we have online media, but nobody could take the essence of those newspaper cartoons from the newspapers. Rather, they have emerged as a major source of opinion on the current issue. So, as a cartoonist, we combine text, illustrations, colors. We want to grab attention of our readers, and we want to make a point. We want to make a point which is really important, which is really serious. So they are no more those that only an entertainment or fun, but they are like when a reader see a cartoon, it should be like, yeah, nailed it, bang on. This is what we are thinking about it. So cartoons have the power to influence a reader's mind. And this is something which I'm not saying, which is established in a lot of researches which have been done on the cartoons and the analysis of newspaper cartoons. There are number of scholars who have researched about the opinion, what people think about cartoons, and there are enough evidence which says that yes, cartoons have influence over the reader's mind. They can actually make them, they can make them maybe in favor or against, or some, make create help them creating their own opinion. And this is very much evident. We have seen how many attacks, how many protests have been made against the cartoonist time and again in the India and in the world also. So people troll them. When you see a cartoon, because now everybody is actually putting their cartoon on social media, so you see a lot of hate comments on that. You see people are blaming them for biases, blaming them for representation, especially with the help of for the political cartoons. So if you are, you're writing against any political party or a politician, and then the hate story starts. So that's the reality even today in 21st century 2022 also. And cartoonists, they of course they use various tools, because that's the essence. You use symbolism, you use exaggeration at times, labeling. There are different ways, different tools which are used by cartoonists, which I'm sure the other experts can also talk about. You create caricatures, irony, but at the end of the day, the idea is to give a message, give your opinion. Some people might think that it is a propaganda, it is a visual propaganda, But whatever said and done, newspaper cartoons are powerful tools to communicate. And most of the newspapers, they focus their cartoons on, political cartoons. Their stories are majorly linked to the political cartoons. But at the same time, they also talk about sportsmen, celebrities. Like in recent COVID times, we saw a lot of cartoons about teachers and student relationship, the e-learning. So there are a variety of ways in which cartoonists have expressed themselves. And there are very popular name which all of us have been following. So RK Lakshman's Common Man actually created history, huge fan following, and appreciation even from the politicians. So there are stories and there are articles which says that the Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, they actually used to see at the cartoons and appreciate ke, acha, this is the cartoon which they have made. And of course there are numerous names which I can talk about. I can talk about K Shankar Pillai. He's also called the father of political cartooning, and how he has he has created more than 4,000 cartoons and made a mark in the history. Recent times, Satish Acharya, he's doing a lot of cartoon. He's making cartoons on the contemporary issues, and the list goes on. And this is the state in India, and of course there are big names in outside also. So if you see US media, they have actually done really great job, and they are openly criticizing their politicians and the economic conditions. But yes, this is something that the power of cartoons, which are which is there, they have their free will. So this is one important expression which they communicate the message, the opinion. This is something which is unique about cartoons, and they are, of course, they are enjoyed by the audience. So yeah, this is something which I want to say as an opening remark on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your wonderful views and for contextualizing the importance and essence of editorial cartoons in today's time. I request Dr. Sagar Taranga to please present your views on today's topic, sir. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I'm audible to everyone. This is the kind of season of festivities. I'm really glad that I am sharing this platform with such illustrious names. And thank you, Dr. Maheshwari, for kind of providing me with such a beautiful pitch. Uh, so, cartoons in recent years, I'll go straight away to the topic. Now, as an academic, my interest with cartoons stem from closely studying the theater of conflict and the theater of war in certain South Asian countries, particularly Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and of course, India. So, cartoons for me, when I took up cartoons as part of sequential narratives, as visual narratives, as graphic novels, as serialized comic actions and serialized visual verbal plays, my interest has always taken me to such documentations which mobilize cartoons in order to show the dissent and the protest of the public. How in certain countries, sequential narratives, visual narratives, as Dr. Maheshwari was mentioned, garnered and mobilized and shaped public opinion. Now, back in my department, I teach South Asian literature. And as I was teaching South Asian literature for the past couple of years, I got pulled into this theater, this space where visual narratives are slowly becoming part of an evidentiary narrative. They are transforming themselves. They are transformed into, almost proofs, as historical archives, as historical witnesses. My particular doctoral work concerned Joe Sacco. He was Maltese born, and he has extensively worked on conflict scenarios across Palestine, Gorazdu, Bosnia, Serbia. He is the name when we talk about comics journalism. I think Joe Sacco stands out. Now, what he has done, now Dr. Maheshwari was talking about editorial cartoons. I would love to talk about cartoons as part and parcel of an archive, as a historical notation, something that could be used as proof, as witness in instances of grave human rights violations. And that has been the case in recent years. Cartoonists or graphic novelists, if you prefer a different term, like Joe Sacco, has mobilized an entirely different methodology when they draw their cartoons. Now, if you pick up a text or a book, the most famous text in Palestine, footnotes in Gaza, safe area Gorazdu, I'll not kind of pull you into this list of names, but just if you just look at his text, you will find that a very caricaturist avatar of Joe Sacco is depicted in his cartoons. In his cartoons, he is eyeless, he is wearing shades, and his eyes are glazed over. You cannot look into his eyes. And he kind of executes a very loutish, over the top, a privileged avatar. Now, this is a way for Joe Sacco to critique how mainstream global conflict reportage functions. Now, what I am trying to give you in this opening remark is quickly break down how cartoons as part of a sequential narrative work. So if you pick up a text, you will find this very loutish caricature of Sacco, who is pandering to the lurid curiosity and tastes of the Western countries. He would give a particular conflict-ridden scenario its 15 minutes of fame, go into a conflict zone, make some interviews in a wish, ask a few questions, and then safely retreat to the hotel or resort where the foreign journalists assembled. Now, this is how many of Sacco's comics to begin. But as you read through the sequential narrative, you will find that these loutish, this over the top, this simulated image ultimately does break down. And the more dense, complicated, I prefer to use the term sticky, a sticky sojourn emerges. That this is a journalist who is not going into these conflict scenarios to earn a quick buck or provide us with a simulated series of images. He would actually acculturate into such societies. His sojourn would be long. He would be penetrating those foreign cultures, understand their cultural standards, understand their cultural mores, stay with them, and give us a proper perspective. Now, before I I'm sure that we will have time to discuss this aspects, certain critical methodologies of aspects of what we exactly understand by cartoons being part of a sequential narrative, serving as evidence, serving as proof, serving as a historical document at par with history. So the point that comes back more often when we keep this evidentiary ethics in mind and look at Sacco's work, that he is not a slave to objective journalism. He is very, opinionated about his stance that his documentation is subjective. There is a famous book by Sacco Journalism, and Sacco says that he doesn't believe in sitting on the fence. He would take sides. He would take sides of those who cannot speak, who have no representation in mainstream media. So, so these are the things that have always attracted me. And for the time being, I have talked about cartoons only as part of a sequential narrative. When I studied other conflict scenarios in other neighboring countries like Bangladesh, I will just kind of put this remark, before we kind of invite the other guests to speak, that in Bangladesh also, when the liberation war did break out, the perception of the liberation war was created by cartoonists like Nirmal Roy, like Amol Chakraborty, and many others, who were able to predict that how this conflict this would pan out in the months, progressing from March in the year 1971. So they were actually, working like sociologists, cultural historians. So this is one thing that I've always found very fascinating in terms of cartoons, and not simply cartoons, but cartoons as part of a larger sequential documentary narrative, that they are not banal or they are not ephemeral, but they have this density which kind of produces a particular kind of ethical etching on someone's mind. It stays with you. It is not transitional. It does not flow away. Now that is the misconception some people have, that they are leisure oriented purpose. But cartoons nowadays have traveled a long way, and they today serve a very strong and purposive ethical purpose. So, Manjima, I think either that would suffice presently for an opening remark.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful views, for sharing your wonderful views, and for explaining how newspaper cartoons have such a dominant, crucial, and ethical purpose to serve. Uh, I would request Dr. Gogoi to please share your views for today's topic, sir. Over to you.
A very good afternoon to all my respected panelists. And Manjima, I am Deborshee Gogoi. And at the very outset, let me thank TYS for giving me this opportunity to share my views on a very interesting topic, that is history and adaptation of newspaper cartoons. Actually, I am a part-time cartoonist, I would like to say. I am a hobbyist, and I have been contributing towards this Assam Tribunes for the past 5 years. Apart from that, since I have been allotted 5 minutes of time, what I would like to do is I would like to confine myself to political cartooning in Assam. I'll just try to give some idea of how this cartooning took off in Assam. We all know that cartoon is actually are simple drawings that try to showcase the features of a subject in a humorous and and exaggerated way. And these cartoons are very popular among people of all age groups. And there are different types of cartoons. There are comic strips, there are comic books, there are political cartoons. Nowadays we have animations, and we have single panel cartoons, and all these are very popular among all age groups. When we talk about political cartooning, then I would say that political cartoons are actually a gift from Western culture to India. And when these first newspapers were being published during the 1850s, actually those newspapers also carried some numbers of political cartoons in their pages. And the first cartoon, however, that had a political impact was in the Sulabh Samasar that came out in 1870s in India. And those cartoons that were published in Sulabh Samasar tried to criticize and attack the racist judicial system that was that existed during those years. And when we talk about this satire drawings with regard to Assam, then we can trace the history back to the Vaishnavite era, when Shankardev, Srimanta Shankardev, started making satire drawings in the barks of the agar trees to depict this our some mythological stories. And during the beginning of the 19th century, it was Lokminath Bezborwa who actually can be considered as the father of Assamese satirical drawings, who also created a number of cartoon characters like I would like to name some, that Kipawar Burwa, then Hokuru Dwakwa, Amar Sansar. These are some popular comic characters that he created during the publication of Bahi that came up in 1909. But these regular political cartoons started coming up regularly featured during the publication of the weekly newspaper that was Navayu in 1960. And Pulok Gogoi, who is considered as the father of political cartoon in Assam, became very popular with his political cartoons. Those were published in Navayu. And in 1969, he also tried to publish a cartoon Assamese book in the name Cartoon in 1969. And there was another very popular cartoonist who started his his career as a political cartoonist in the year 1952, and who joined the Assam Tribune Group in 1964, and it was Proloika Doctor. His political cartoons were very popular, and he also created a character like that of R.K. Narayan's, R.K. Lakshman's Common Man. And his box of political cartoon under the name it was Kuhudi was published in Doinik Ahom, and it was enjoyed by a very large group of readers. And then this legacy was now carried out by Utpal Talukdar, who is also a very renowned political cartoonist. Apart from, there are many cartoonists like Sampak Borbora, Utpal Talukdar, then there is Ranjit Gogoi, Nitupana Rajbangshi, who are publishing cartoons in the newspapers, Assamese newspapers, and who have been trying their best to highlight the various issues that are concerning the Assamese society. So this is again at last I would like to say that if we go through the number of readers, then in that case the reader base for political cartooning it is very huge as compared to some other cartoons like wildlife cartooning, and nowadays we have conservation cartoons. The reader base is very small, and that's why more and more young cartoonists, they are more associated with political cartooning rather than some other genres of cartooning. So this is what I would like to see. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your views about political cartoons and wildlife cartooning. That is a very unique and interesting aspect of cartooning that you have brought up in your presentation. I request Rianka ma'am to share her views on today's topic. Ma'am, over to you.
Very good evening, everyone. I would like to share a slide. Let me see. Are you able to see the PPT?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay.
By the way, your PPT isn't visible. We can only see the StreamYard studio here.
I think I have just done something wrong here. Are you able to see the PPT?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible now.
It's visible now? Okay. So basically, I'm going to talk about the political representation of the partition of India through cartoons. And since largely this, concerns about my work of research, So I'm focusing on the cartoons during the period of 1946 to 48, and how it failed to capture some of the major events of the common people. So during this time, we had three leading national dailies, or you can say newspapers from the period of 46 to 48. So Dawn was a leading newspaper that often propagated position of the Muslim League's position on partition. So they prominently, you can say, critiqued the Mahatma Gandhi or the congressman, or caricatured Nehru and their ideologies. The Tribune and Hindustan Times were the dominant newspaper dailies, which was more preoccupied with the ideology of the Congress. And in most of their cartoons, they had caricatured Jinnah and his ideology and his followers, the Muslim League, and how it's going to fail. The third newspaper was the Civil and Military Gazette, and this was the counterpart of the Britishers. Now, the Britishers had kept a very neutral stance on themselves, and they were like the watchers from the background, seeing both the parties fighting among themselves. And they presented the cartoons which highlighted the British as putting enormous efforts in bringing about the political settlement between both the parties, and they were concerned about the Indian situation and projected the native leaders as lacking any seriousness, or who are busy fighting among themselves. So it's very ironical, because it forges a discourse opposite to the widely accepted British policy of, you can say, divide and rule. So these were the three leading newspapers, and I'm going to talk about I have selected a few of the prominent cartoons presented in these newspapers. See, the first line, this is a cartoon from the newspaper Dawn, and it projects Gandhi as a mule who's delivering lessons to his fellow mules. And these fellow mules are none other than the other congressmen like Jawaharlal Nehru, Maulana Azad, Tej Bahadur, and other Gandhi followers. And in the back side, we can see there is a huge, heap of hay, which are supposed to be fed to the mules. And the hay, it is clearly, stated there is Akhand Hindustan. The next slide, this is also another cartoon from Dawn, and this talks about the failure of Gandhi and his ideology of non-violence. It criticizes Gandhi's ideology as devoid of any conscience. As we can see, his conscience is outside his body, and he's sitting in the dark trying to figure out where exactly is his ahimsa, from where he found his ideology. So this is basically a cartoon which was published in the Hindustan Times, and it talks about Jinnah. So basically, this was published after Jinnah broke his silence on the partition, Punjab violence, and he gave statement regarding how brutal it is after a prolonged silence, which was considered to be very pathetic, particularly because he had been so pro in dividing the nation. So the image clearly shows that Jinnah, who has let out the communal violence, it is given the metaphoric image of Frankenstein. And after Frankenstein goes out and all the vandalism and everything has been done, now Jinnah is in a stage that he wants the monster back into the coffin. So he is kind of cajoling the monster or coaxing the monster to come back into the coffin so that it can be shut down. But it is too late. Already, the seed of violence has been sown. The next image is again a prominent cartoon from Deccan Herald. And here Jinnah is projected as a gopi, who is kind of a follower, who's very opportunist. This is a cartoon from the Tribune, which again critiqued the image of Jinnah by, stating that the shadow connotes the proposal or the measures that the mission members were to deliver shortly. And even prior to that, Jinnah is very selfish in noting that I want my half first. This is also a cartoon in Dawn, and it shows this was published after the death of Mahatma Gandhi. And the image gives the implication that with the death of Mahatma Gandhi, his entire dream is also over, his dream of the triumph of non-violence, and on the other page it is written as the end. So technically, all his ideologies, all his beliefs, neither it could flourish as long as he was alive, nor with his death it has permanently come to an end. So this cartoon is named as Mango Tree Trick, and this was published in the Tribune, where Jinnah is projected as a snake charmer, and he's trying to play his pungi as with the hope that a small plant will grow into enormous tree. And the plant is the title they're given is Pakistan Economy. So this is somewhere a sarcasm on the would-be economy of Pakistan, which would survive on, you can say, funds of other nations, or they will definitely not have a very prosperous economy. This cartoon is from the British perspective because this was published in the Civil and Military Gazette. And here, you can say, very politically correct cartoon, where it shows that the British man is in the center. And on one side, we can see Jinnah, and on the other side, we can see the Indian representative. And this is basically shows the dilemma of the princely states, as with whom they would like to merge or with whom they would like to go ahead with. So this is again another cartoon from the Civil and Military Gazette. And this shows that how both the parties, Jinnah and Nehru, they both are throwing stones at each other. And basically, this was, published after the failure of the meeting held at Shimla. And with much hope, the meeting was conducted, but it was just throwing stones at each other. In this cartoon, we can see that, again, it's a sarcasm on Gandhi, who's on a burning ship. And the ship is burning because there's flames of partition everywhere. But Gandhi is still hopeful. He refuses to, get down from the ship. He's still hopeful that, there will be, Akhand Bharat, there will be united, Hindustan. So he's still living in the hope. So this is a cartoon from Dawn, which came for heavy criticism from multiple aspects. First, it shows that there's a Muslim man who's pointing towards Mountbatten, who's sitting on a couch, and who is reading a book called How to Become Glamorous. And he is also simultaneously drinking wine, which is stated as very casual wine. And on the background, the partition is being torn everywhere. However, the depiction of partition shows that a sick man is probably either molesting a woman, a helpless woman, or is carrying the dead body of a woman. And the depiction of partition is definitely one-sided because it is showing that it is only the sick who had vandalized and plundered. And the Muslim man puts all the blames on Mountbatten, who's obviously oblivion of everything that is going on. Now, this cartoon, which was published in Dawn, also, acquired severe criticism, particularly from Nehru, who couldn't tolerate this kind of, it was a very dark criticism and dark sarcasm. So Gandhi is basically, presented here as a caricature of a sorcerer, and he's trying his best to save Congress. So these are some of the cartoons that I wanted to show you. So basically, if we see all the cartoons here, all the cartoons that I have projected, none of them, capture the essence of the common people, or how, the partition had affected the common masses. Probably the responsibility of a cartoonist could have been much beyond in igniting national consciousness regarding the problems that was persisting. But this was largely, you can say, political attack on each other, and therefore, they had failed to capture the sense that how common people were affected, or what extent the brutality of partition had gone ahead with. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was such an interesting and well researched presentation. Thank you for giving us a glimpse of partition newspaper cartoons and the cartoons that were published in the news dailies around that time. With this, I would like to begin today's question and answer session. So, my first question is to Rianka, ma'am. Ma'am, as your research interest revolves around partition history and narratives, did you read any editorial cartoon in the recent past that recounted any major episode from the partition of Bengal?
See, basically, the partition has been highly sensuous topic, and not everybody wants to touch this area. This is like digging back your, past wound. However, I have noticed that either it is during the, you can say, Independence Day celebration, glimpses of partition are brought back, maybe in small traces, to remind us that this was not only a day that we need to celebrate, the independence of the country, but it was not at the cost of, something so lame. So many people had lost their lives. So I think this year itself, several newspapers and magazines, and even the internet was flooded with, cartoons and caricatures and memes, by reminding us of the past, that what had happened. However, when I talk about the partition, definitely partition of Bengal is slightly, hindered or pushed in the side, and it's the Punjab partition that comes to the limelight.
Right. Thank you, ma'am, for expressing your views uh, with such assertion and confidence. My next question is to Dr. Deborshee Gogoi. Sir, um, in a telephonic interview with the third pole, you mentioned how your work gives voice to voiceless animals. Would you like to explain this aspect of your comic illustrations? Sir, you are on mute. Could you please unmute yourself?
Actually, madam, what I feel is that our society is misinformed. There is superstition, and there are taboos across culture, and this makes the wildlife very vulnerable to human atrocities. But with the people, we are least concerned about what is happening to them, what is happening to the wildlife, what is happening to the nature. Moreover, these animals, they are voiceless, and they don't have a social media account like we have. So what I thought that I will be using my cartoons, because I think cartoon is one such medium that can make a animal talk. This is the only medium, creative medium, that I feel can give voice to the voiceless. As a result of this, what I have done is that for the past 8 or 9 years, I have been doing wildlife cartooning, where I am trying to bring up issues that are concerning the survival of wildlife, the issues that are threatening our environment, and causing climate change and global warming, etc. That's why I gave talked about that, in the third book.
Thank you, sir. And you have had a fascinating journey with wildlife cartooning. My next question is to Dr. Mondol. So I would like to ask you, um, how do you associate comics with your prolonged research on the exploration of conflicted geographies? You have mentioned that that aspect of your research, but I request you to please elaborate if you could.
Okay. I'll just give it a shot, but I am really more fascinated by, Professor Gogoi's and Professor Sarkar's exposition here, because Professor Sarkar has brought over the archival research into play, which I think needs more exposure. And Professor Gogoi is himself a practicing cartoonist. Okay, I had this question, I might ask him about this later, that whether in Assam a very more crystallized body of cartoonists is forming, more conscious about their own rights. Nowadays cartoonists are kind of tried for various kinds of charges, whether a regulatory body of cartoonists could come up, because there is already an Indian Institute of Cartoons in Bangalore, and they're trying their best to kind of archive, create events. So I think whether there can be certain immunities that could be created for emerging and practicing cartoonists. So that is something I was really very eager to ask Professor Gogoi. He could answer that at some later stage. But regarding your question, Ms. Sarkar, I would say that as I was mentioning in the brief opening, that that a time has come, when you see cartoons in newspapers, and cartoons also part of a sequential narrative. Now the problem did I just okay, I think you are back. Can you hear me, Manjima? Am I
Yes,
audible?
yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay.
You
I
are.
think I just lost you for a second. So uh, the question that we should be asking now is that what are the ways we can reinterpret cartoon as a narrative? Are they substantial enough to serve as proof, as evidence, as historical documents? you know or they function like just some kind of oral histories. My research and my teaching has always taken up that how we understand comics, how do we understand cartoons, and whether cartoons have the potential to provide the journalist on the field with a certain kind of a roadmap. And this is the case with Sacco, whom I have researched. Sacco is a real time on field journalist. All of Sacco's works, and many have followed suit after Sacco, all of Sacco's works would kind of give you a particular ethical roadmap, ethical horizon, that how do I document the other? How do I document a scenario of genocide? How do I document a precarious subject? Because the precarious subject might as well be lying to me. He or she might be lying and creating a very pathetic narrative in front of me just to gain the spotlight. So cartoons for me has always been embroiled first with the question of truth. How do we know that this exposition, this visual piece, documents a true bit of history? Because as cartoonists, the cartoonists have to be, they have to be strategists. They come, they see the streets, they navigate the streets, and they have to know how this economy of affect works. A victim is trying to sell me his or her story. How do I judge and appraise his story? How do I know that this piece of story, this piece of documentation is good piece of documentation, can form a part of history? So this thing has always intrigued me. When I looked at the cartoons, I know, unlike Professor Sarkar, I have been very lazy and not been able to prepare a PPT for you, because maybe next time. So when I look at the Bangladesh Mukti Juddha cartoons, when the Bangladesh Liberation War cartoons, the cartoon is there. like Noren Roy, like Amol Chakraborty, like even our P.K.S. Kutti, who had a huge sojourn back in Bengal. He almost considered himself a Bengali. And when you look at Kutti's cartoons, he is more of a sociologist than a mere cartoonist. Right. When you look at his cartoons, you get to know about the dress codes, the caste and class affiliations of a particular time of India. Right. The question that has always troubled me, that how does the cartoonist navigate the field of conflict and the field of action? What kind of ethical practices does he embody for himself? Because memory, as Sacco says, is very shifting. And conflict reportage is all the very problematic, because all those issues and documentations on conflict live as oral narratives passed down through generations. How do I go back to the source? So these are certain things that I always keep in mind when I teach my students about cartoons, comics, or sequential narratives. That the thrust is this: that how do cartoons would one day serve as an archive for a more comprehensive history. So I think, given the time, Manjima, I can just offer you this bit of my work.
Thank you for your amazing reply, sir, and your explanation bridged the gap between cartoons and issues that are of contemporary, socially important issues that are of contemporary political interest. Um, my final question is to Dr. Maheshwari before I conclude today's panel. I would like to ask ma'am. Ma'am, do you think it is imperative that newspaper cartoons use diverse symbols and allegories to convey a social message?
Yeah, I think, of course, because we are trying to, like I said, we're trying to convey a message in a very different way. It's not an article, it's not a news, it's an opinion, but with the help of visuals. That's the uniqueness about the cartoons. So you are, as a cartoonist, definitely we are supposed to use such kind of hidden meanings and symbolic expressions to make it different from the regular textual content. And this is what is the beauty of cartoons. This is something which, that's why I said, people consider it as entertainment, fun, but at the same time it is something, a serious message. There is an opinion behind it. So like Professor Sagar said, that of course there is an issue of archiving, and how do we take that whatever they are saying it's true. But like I said, cartoons are purely opinion. So these opinions are based on whatever the cartoonist think. That's why the name editorial content come in picture. Like when we read an editorial, we can make out. And like for that matter, Professor Rianka also showed some cartoons. With the analysis of those cartoons, you can surely, you can convincingly say that the Dawn was more about, against Gandhi, or they were trying to show it against. So that's how, we also decide that that's the bias of that particular newspaper, or they have a they have a bent towards a particular party, or an agenda. So cartoons also play a role of that agenda setting also. And but obviously with the use of symbols, the symbolic meaning, the analogies, they actually try to convey a strong message, and that message is purely an opinion. So as a cartoonist, you are trying to give your opinion. And of course, there's another point which is raised here, is about the ethics. That what are the ethics? Is there any body for it, or there should be a body, or there should be some ethics about it? So yes, and again, it's a debate. People have been taking cartoons in a positive ways. At times they have faced sedition also. Many cartoonists face sedition also. So, but yes, with the changing times, of course, the cartoons and their relevance is there. And that's one reason the newspaper cartoons have become polytoons on television. And again, a popular series, or you can say a popular thing which people would like to watch, and the way they represent. So, giving a true, the real soul is actually in the hidden agenda, the hidden meaning behind the cartoon. So, yeah, of course.
Thank you, ma'am, for explaining so beautifully how editorial cartoons can uh, shape our opinions, and even now how much they are relevant. With this, I would like to conclude today's session. I once again like to say that we are calling for submissions of stories, essays, and poems. And for project architecture and submission guidelines, please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz. I extend a heartfelt thanks to Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari, Dr. Sarkar Mandal, Dr. Deborshee Gogoi, and Rianka Sarkar ma'am for this wonderful and remarkable session. At the outset of Durga Puja celebrations, I wish you all a very happy Shoshti. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Manjima. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you
Pleasure.
so much.
Thank you for being
Happy
wonderful.
festive wishes to
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Take care. Take care.